There was a time when lunch wasn't something you ordered from an app or grabbed from a drive-through window. It was something that came from home, wrapped in wax paper or tucked into a metal lunch pail, made by hands that knew exactly how to stretch a dollar without sacrificing flavor. Working people across America had their own sandwich traditions, recipes passed down through families who understood that good food didn't have to be expensive or complicated. These weren't fancy creations with exotic ingredients or clever names designed by marketing teams. They were honest meals, built from whatever was available, whatever was affordable, whatever could fuel a body through 8 or 10 or 12 hours of hard work. They had names that sound strange to modern ears, combinations that might make you raise an eyebrow, but they fed generations of Americans who built this country with their own two hands. Today, we're looking at 15 forgotten working-class sandwiches that used to fill lunchboxes and factory break rooms across the nation. Simple, humble creations that somehow disappeared when we weren't paying attention, taking a piece of American history with them. Number 15, the lard sandwich, Depression-era simplicity. The lard sandwich is exactly what it sounds like, and yes, people actually ate them, and some even loved them. During the Great Depression and in the lean years that followed, families had to make do with whatever they had, and lard was cheap, available, and calorie-dense. You'd spread it on bread, sometimes just plain, sometimes with a sprinkle of salt or sugar, and that was lunch. Sounds terrible by today's standards, but remember that these were people doing physical labor in an era before fast food, before cheap protein was everywhere, before anyone counted calories or worried about cholesterol. The lard provided energy and fat that kept bodies working through long days. Some families would crisp up the lard in a pan first, turning it into cracklings that added texture and flavor. Others would mix it with onions or herbs to make it more palatable. The lard sandwich disappeared as prosperity returned and better options became affordable. But for those who ate them, there's no shame, only the memory of doing what you had to do to survive. It's a reminder that our grandparents and great-grandparents lived through times we can barely imagine today. Number 14, the wish sandwich, a joke that wasn't really funny. The Blues Brothers made a joke about the wish sandwich in their movie, 2 pieces of bread and you wish you had some meat. But for countless working-class families, especially in the South and Midwest during hard times, this wasn't really a joke at all. A bread sandwich, sometimes called a wish sandwich or a hobo sandwich, was exactly what poor families ate when there was nothing else. You'd butter 2 slices of bread if you were lucky enough to have butter, maybe add a pinch of salt or a thin layer of jam, and that was it. Children carried these to school, workers took them to job sites, and families ate them at dinner tables when money ran out before payday arrived. The wish sandwich represented the absolute bottom rung of poverty cuisine, the meal you ate when you'd run out of literally everything else. It disappeared not because tastes changed or cooking methods evolved, but because America got wealthier and even the poorest families gained access to basic proteins and fillings. Nobody misses the wish sandwich, but forgetting it means forgetting how hard life used to be for regular working people. Number 13, the sugar sandwich, a child's simple pleasure. Before parents worried about processed sugar and empty calories, before organic snacks and carefully balanced nutrition, there was the sugar sandwich. White bread, butter, and a generous sprinkling of white sugar. That's all it took to make a child happy and give them enough energy to play until dinner time. This wasn't fancy or nutritious, but it was cheap, quick, and kids absolutely loved it. Mothers would make these for after-school snacks, pack them in lunchboxes, or hand them to children running out the door to play. The sugar would crunch between your teeth, dissolve on your tongue, and the butter kept it from being too dry. Sometimes families would use brown sugar instead, or add a dash of cinnamon for special occasions. The sugar sandwich vanished as nutrition science caught up with parenting, as we learned about cavities and diabetes and the importance of balanced diets. Modern parents would be horrified at feeding their kids straight sugar on white bread, but a generation or 2 ago, it was as normal as peanut butter and jelly, just another way to fill young bellies without spending much money. Number 12, the tomato sandwich, summer on white bread. The tomato sandwich might seem too simple to be forgotten, but the version working-class families made has definitely disappeared from most tables. We're not talking about fancy heirloom tomatoes on artisan bread with special mayo. We're talking about whatever tomatoes came from your backyard garden, sliced thick, laid on squishy white bread with a smear of mayonnaise, salt, and pepper. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. During summer months, when tomatoes were ripe and practically free if you grew them yourself, these sandwiches appeared at lunch and dinner, sometimes for days on end. The juice would soak into the bread, turning it soft and tangy, and the whole thing would fall apart in your hands if you weren't careful. Factory workers would bring these in their lunch pails, farmers would eat them in the fields, and children would devour them after helping pick tomatoes under the hot sun. The tomato sandwich disappeared when gardens became less common, when people moved from houses to apartments, when buying produce seemed easier than growing it. You can still make one today, but it's not the same. The tomatoes don't taste like they used to, the bread is different, and the entire context of eating what you grew yourself has faded into memory. Number 11. The fried bologna sandwich. Working man's steak. The fried bologna sandwich deserves more respect than it gets because it fed millions of workers and satisfied countless cravings with minimal fuss and expense. You take a slice or two of bologna, the cheapest lunch meat available, and fry it in a hot pan until the edges curled up and the surface got crispy and browned. Slap it on white bread with yellow mustard, maybe add a slice of American cheese if you were feeling fancy, and you had yourself a meal. The frying transformed that cold, rubbery bologna into something with texture and flavor, something that felt substantial and satisfying. Blue-collar workers across America ate these for decades, from lunch counters to home kitchens to factory break rooms. Some people cut a cross in the center of the bologna before frying to keep it flat. Others left it alone and let it curl into a bowl shape that held the mustard. The fried bologna sandwich started disappearing as bologna itself fell out of favor, as people became more health conscious, as eating processed meat became somehow shameful instead of practical. A few diners still serve them, a few families still make them, but mostly they've faded away, taking with them a piece of working-class food culture that deserves better than to be forgotten or mocked. Number 10. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich. Strange, but true. Stop making that face. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich was a real thing that real people ate and genuinely enjoyed, especially during the Depression and post-war years. The combination sounds absolutely insane to modern taste buds, but there's an actual logic to it. Peanut butter was cheap protein that didn't require refrigeration, pickles were something most families canned themselves or could buy for pennies, and together they created a sandwich with protein, crunch, salt, and tang. Some people used sweet pickles, others preferred dill, and some even added mayonnaise to the mix, creating a combination that food scientists today would tell you actually works. The fat, acid, salt, and sweet hitting all the flavor notes your tongue craves. Workers would take these to job sites, children would trade them at school lunch tables, and families would serve them on Sunday picnics. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich disappeared because, well, it sounds weird. And as food became more abundant and varied, people stopped needing to combine whatever they had on hand. But ask anyone over 70 from the rural Midwest or South, and there's a decent chance they'll remember these with genuine fondness, strange as that might seem to anyone born after 1970. Number 9. The gravy sandwich, using every last drop. In households where nothing went to waste, and that was most working-class homes for most of American history, leftover gravy didn't get thrown out, it got turned into lunch. The gravy sandwich was simple. Take 2 slices of bread and soak them in whatever gravy remained from last night's dinner, whether that was beef gravy, pork gravy, or even chicken gravy. Some people would eat it cold, others would heat it up, and some would add a few scraps of leftover meat if any existed. This wasn't gourmet food. It wasn't even particularly good food by modern standards, but it was filling, it used ingredients that would otherwise go to waste, and it cost absolutely nothing beyond what you'd already spent on dinner. Factory workers in industrial cities like Pittsburgh and Detroit made these regularly. Farmers across the Midwest packed them in their lunch pails, and children grew up thinking soggy bread soaked in gravy was a normal meal, because it was. The The gravy sandwich disappeared as refrigeration improved, as people became less focused on using every scrap, as prosperity made it easier to simply throw away leftovers rather than transform them into the next day's meal. It represented a way of life where waste was unthinkable, where every penny mattered, where creativity in the kitchen meant the difference between going hungry and having enough. Number 8. The bacon grease sandwich. Fat as food. Before doctors told us about cholesterol and heart disease, before anyone thought twice about eating pure animal fat, the bacon grease sandwich was a legitimate meal in working-class homes. After frying bacon for breakfast, families would save the grease in a jar or can and use it throughout the week as a cooking fat, and yes, as a sandwich spread. You'd take a spoonful of solidified bacon grease, spread it on bread like butter, add a sprinkle of salt, and you had a sandwich that provided serious calories for serious work. Sometimes people would add a slice of onion or tomato to cut through the richness. Other times they'd eat it plain, and some would even toast the bread first to melt the grease into every pore. Coal miners in Appalachia ate these, factory workers in industrial cities packed them, and farmhands consumed them before heading out for 12-hour days in the fields. The bacon grease sandwich disappeared as nutrition science advanced, as people became something people worried about, as doctors started preaching about saturated fats and healthy eating. Nobody recommends eating pure bacon grease anymore, and rightfully so, but understanding that people did reminds us just how much harder physical labor used to be, how many more calories working people needed, and how different our relationship with food has become in just a couple of generations. Number 7. The butter and sugar sandwich. Adult simplicity. Similar to the sugar sandwich, but distinctly different, the butter and sugar sandwich was what adults made for themselves when money was tight and options were limited. You'd spread a thick layer of butter on bread, sprinkle it generously with sugar, white or brown, and eat it slowly, savoring the simple sweetness and richness. This wasn't a children's treat like the sugar sandwich. It was what working people ate during the Depression, what immigrants made when they first arrived with nothing, what elderly people on fixed incomes had for lunch when the Social Security check ran out before the month did. The butter and sugar sandwich represented a kind of dignity in poverty, a way to make something that felt a little bit special out of ingredients that cost almost nothing. Some people would toast the bread first so the butter melted and the sugar caramelized slightly, creating something that approached actual pastry. Others would add cinnamon or a tiny bit of vanilla if they had it, transforming the basic combination into something more complex. This sandwich disappeared as even modest prosperity made better options available, as food stamps and social programs reduced the worst poverty, as the generation that grew up eating these passed away, taking their memories and their recipes with them. The ketchup sandwich sounds like a joke, like something a comedian would make up to exaggerate poverty, but it was absolutely real and surprisingly common during hard times. When there was literally nothing else in the house, no lunch meat, no cheese, no peanut butter, no jelly, there was usually ketchup, and ketchup on bread became lunch. You'd spread it thick, maybe add a little mustard if you had it, perhaps a slice of onion if one was available, and that was your sandwich. The ketchup provided a hit of sweet and tangy flavor, the bread provided bulk and calories, and together they kept hunger at bay for a few hours. Children who grew up during the Depression remember these clearly. Workers in the 1930s and 40s ate them regularly, and even into the 1950s and 60s, the poorest families still relied on them when nothing else was available. The ketchup sandwich disappeared because it had to, because no society wants its people eating condiments on bread as a meal, because it represented a failure of the social safety net, because it was a visible sign of poverty that made everyone uncomfortable. Modern food banks and assistance programs exist partly to ensure that no child ever has to eat a ketchup sandwich for lunch again, though whether we fully succeeded is a question worth asking. Number 5. The lettuce and mayonnaise sandwich. Garden simplicity. The lettuce and mayonnaise sandwich sounds like something you'd make if you were on a diet, but for working-class families with vegetable gardens, it was a legitimate summer meal. You'd take crisp lettuce fresh from the garden, usually iceberg because that's what grew easily, pile it high on white bread, spread mayonnaise generously, add salt and pepper, and that was lunch. The crunch of the lettuce, the richness of the mayo, the soft bread all combined into something surprisingly satisfying despite the lack of protein or substantial calories. Housewives would make these for their husbands' lunches during summer months when lettuce was abundant and free if you grew it yourself. Children would eat them after playing outside, and families would serve them at picnics alongside whatever else they had. The lettuce and mayonnaise sandwich wasn't meant to be fancy or filling or particularly nutritious. It was meant to be cheap, refreshing, and made from things you already had. It disappeared as gardens became less common, as people moved to cities and apartments, as buying lunch became easier than making it, as sandwiches became expected to have meat or cheese or something substantial. You can still make one today, but you'd feel like you were missing something, like you'd forgotten to add the actual filling, which maybe tells you everything about how our expectations have changed. Number 4. The cold meatloaf sandwich. Next day's glory. The cold meatloaf sandwich deserves a place in the American Food Hall of Fame, but somehow it's been forgotten by everyone except a few stubborn traditionalists. Day-old meatloaf, sliced thick, placed on white bread with a smear of ketchup or mustard, maybe a little mayonnaise, created a sandwich that was dense, satisfying, and genuinely delicious. The meatloaf was easier to slice when cold, held together better, and somehow the flavors had melded overnight into something even better than the original hot version. Working-class families across America relied on the cold meatloaf sandwich because meatloaf was economical. You could stretch a pound of ground beef with breadcrumbs, eggs, and onions to feed 6 people, then use the leftovers for sandwiches the next day. Factory workers loved these because they were substantial, they didn't need to be heated, and they actually tasted good after sitting in a lunch pail for a few hours. Blue-collar fathers carried them to job sites, mothers packed them for their own lunches, and teenagers made them after school when they were hungry enough to eat anything. The cold meatloaf sandwich disappeared as meatloaf itself fell out of fashion, as cooking from scratch became less common, as people stopped making large dinners that generated leftovers worth saving. It's a shame because a good cold meatloaf sandwich is honestly better than half the things people buy at delis today. Number 3. The onion sandwich, raw and unashamed. The onion sandwich is about as working class as food gets. Raw onions sliced thick, laid on buttered bread, sprinkled with salt, and eaten without apology or concern for your breath afterward. This was a favorite among factory workers, especially immigrants from Eastern Europe who brought the tradition with them and kept it alive in industrial cities. The onion provided a sharp, intense flavor that woke you up and made you feel alive. The butter mellowed it slightly, and the bread made it substantial enough to call a meal. Some people added a slice of tomato in summer, others preferred just onion and salt, and some even used raw garlic instead for an even more intense experience. The onion sandwich required a certain kind of person, someone who worked hard enough that they didn't care about having onion breath, someone who ate for sustenance rather than pleasure, someone who appreciated strong flavors and didn't apologize for them. Coal miners in Pennsylvania ate these, steel workers in Ohio packed them, and dock workers in port cities consumed them without a second thought. The onion sandwich disappeared as American food culture became more refined, as people started working in offices instead of factories, as having good breath became important for customer service and white-collar jobs. You can still find older folks who remember these fondly and make them occasionally, but mostly they vanished along with the culture that created them. Number 2. The potato sandwich. Carbs on carbs. The potato sandwich, literally mashed potatoes or cold leftover potatoes on bread, seems ridiculous to modern sensibilities, but it made perfect sense to working people who needed cheap calories and had limited options. You'd take leftover mashed potatoes from dinner, spread them thick on bread, maybe add a little butter or gravy, sometimes a bit of salt and pepper, and you had a sandwich that was filling, inexpensive, and used up food that might otherwise go to waste. Some families would use cold boiled potatoes sliced thin, others preferred mashed, and some would even fry potato slices and put them on bread while still warm. This was common in British working-class communities and carried over to American industrial cities where British immigrants settled.
The potato sandwich provided serious energy for physical labor. All those carbohydrates meant all-day fuel for men working in mines, factories, and on docks. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't particularly flavorful, but it kept people going through brutal shifts and helped families stretch their food budgets when money was tight. The potato sandwich disappeared because we learned about nutrition and variety, because carbs on carbs became something to avoid rather than embrace, because poverty itself changed and people had access to more protein and vegetables. But understanding that people ate potato sandwiches regularly helps us understand just how hard working-class life used to be, how much physical labor people did, and how different our food culture has become.
The mustard and cracker sandwich, rock bottom. The mustard and cracker sandwich, saltine crackers on bread with mustard as the only filling, represents the absolute depths of Depression-era poverty cuisine. This wasn't something people chose to eat, it was what you made when there was literally nothing else in the house except the most basic staples. You'd spread yellow mustard on white bread, crush saltine crackers and sprinkle them over the mustard to add some texture and salt, then close it up and eat it slowly, trying to convince yourself it was a real meal. Children remember these from the worst days of the Depression. Elderly people talk about them from the lean years after World War II, and even into the 1950s, the poorest families would resort to these when money and food ran out. The mustard and cracker sandwich had no nutritional value to speak of, no protein, barely any calories, just pure survival food meant to put something, anything, in your stomach. It disappeared because America became wealthy enough that even the poorest families could afford peanut butter or bologna, because social safety nets improved, because shame and pride pushed these recipes out of sight and out of mind. Nobody wants to remember the mustard and cracker sandwich because it represents a kind of poverty we'd like to believe doesn't exist anymore. But forgetting these meals entirely means forgetting how far we've come, how much our grandparents and great-grandparents endured, and how fragile prosperity really is. These 15 forgotten sandwiches tell a story about America that doesn't make it into history books or museum exhibits. They tell us about people who worked harder than most of us can imagine, who made do with less than we'd ever accept, who fed their families with creativity, determination, and whatever ingredients they could scrape together. Some of these sandwiches disappeared because we learned about nutrition and decided we could do better. Others vanished because prosperity made them unnecessary, because we moved beyond the kind of poverty that required eating sugar on bread or crackers with mustard. A few disappeared simply because tastes changed, because gardens became rare, because cooking from scratch seemed quaint rather than necessary. But all of them deserve to be remembered because they represent real people, real hunger, real ingenuity, and real resilience. If you enjoyed this journey through America's forgotten working-class food traditions, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Did anyone in your family eat any of these sandwiches? Do you have other forgotten recipes worth sharing? And subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration of the ordinary things that made America extraordinary. Until next time, remember where we came from and appreciate how far we've traveled.